Adam coughed. He was burning up with a fever. His mother dabbed a wet cloth on his brow. When there was a knock on the door, she momentarily left, only to return with the village doctor. He sat down beside Adam and began his examination. Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide, Jason. Today, I'd like to take a look at how a fantasy world would handle plagues and diseases. I'm sure you've read many fantasy series, or seen shows where plagues brought chaos and devastation to the population. But how would a fantasy world handle it? We can look to real plagues to get an idea. The Black Plague happened from 1346 to 1353 and has at least 50 million deaths across all of Europe. It was spread by fleas on rats. This led to a lot of behavioral changes. If one member of the family showed symptoms, the whole family was locked in their house, even if they weren't infected. But then they would get infected. It was believed to have originated in modern-day Kyrgyzstan in 1330s, and it spread along the major trade routes, including the Silk Road. There were whole villages destroyed by the plague, while others never saw a single case. A big contributor was travelers from one town to another. When there was no one going to a place, there was no one to bring the infection. The concept of germ theory wasn't fully developed then, but don't assume that they didn't have an idea. The ancient Greeks had the miasma theory, which suggested that sewage and decomposing matter would create harmful particles which were the source of diseases. This miasma was referred to as bad air. They even used wine mixed with herbs to create antiseptics. I talked more on this when I did the Mandrake. Thucydides, a Greek historian, proposed that infections moved from one person to another without coming into contact with the original source of infection. They described the infectious agents as seed-like. This led to the basis of contagion theory, which persisted for millennia. There were several other theories from those times to take note. Unfortunately, they used different names. For example, it was believed that there was a soft humor in semen, which would mix with a hard humor found in women, which would create a baby. So, when reading old texts, the wordage may be a little funny, but conceptually correct. It was in 1668 when the Italian physician Francesco Redi was able to prove that living organisms didn't spontaneously come into existence. At that time, a section of the population believed that maggots could spontaneously spawn on rotting meat, but he proved that it was flies laying eggs. Most fly eggs are about 1.2 millimeters or 0.05 inches long. Easy to miss in dim light, doubly so when smelling something repulsive. The father of microbiology was Anton von Leeuwenhoek, used an early microscope to see bacteria and yeast, calling them animalcules, in 1674. Another who may have done it earlier was Athanasius Kircher in 1646. From there, germ theory evolved with our understanding and improvement of technology. What does that mean for our fantasy series? Well, the ancient people weren't stupid. Hey, don't laugh at them. You'd be amazed at the dumbest things modern people have said to me. And they figured all this out with only their ability to see and know fancy technology. They were smarter than people give them credit for. Now, it depends what era your fantasy setting is. If set in an analog before the mid-1600s, then they wouldn't know about germs based on their science. The main thing would be the invention of the microscope. But they still could have contagion theory or miasma theory, which would be present in the Black Plague. But can microbes be detected with magic? That could alter a lot. If they are able to find viruses and bacteria using spells, then it'll change much. their theories and knowledge would be much more developed with a better understanding of how to treat them. It means that they could detect the infection instantaneously and begin treatment faster, which will result in improved outcomes. There are several contributing factors linked to the cause of plagues. The two big ones were hygiene and proximity to animals. Now, hygiene is an issue. They say that medieval people didn't bathe frequently, but they actually would bathe as much as they were able. Whenever they could go to the river, they would, but it was cold. We have plenty of historical documents which spoke of people in bathing tubs, basically a barrel. That would mean having someone go to the well or river with a bucket, fill it up, and repeat this until your barrel was full. This is very time consuming and becomes expensive if you wish to heat the water, and that adds in some more time. So they often resorted to sponge baths, just washing themselves off with a rag and a bucket of water. But it was the human waste which could build up in the streets of cities. We also have people living much closer to livestock. Bacteria and viruses exist all around us, but most can't make the jump from their host species to humans without a lot of time and exposure. The easiest jumps are from closely related species. For humans, it's monkeys. For pigs, rats, dogs, cats, and then non-mammalian species like birds and reptiles. This is actually an important issue in a fantasy setting. Most fantasy settings have other species, be they elves, dwarves, hobbits, orcs, tieflings, lizards, and birdmen, merfolk, and so on. What species can the plague infect? Will it be all of them at the start, or would it take time to make the jump from one species to another? The order will depend on which species the original disease comes from. Most plagues jump from rodents and animals which interact with them, namely cats and the like. Plagues can come in a few types. Viral tend to have a harder time jumping between species. Bacterial and fungal would be more widespread. Regardless, they could all work as a plague. This means that if the plague is first affecting humans, some races would initially be immune. Whether it can make the jumps from human to elves and dwarves will depend on how closely related they are. If they are immune, then with a human plague, they could serve as physicians and healers to treat the humans. But that immunity will only last a while. I talked about this when I did a video on half-breeds and hybrids between species. If the virus is going to make the jump from human to elf, it would first appear in the half-elves. Now other races will take time, and that brings us how to treat the infection. There are numerous ancient herbal methods for treatment. Among the classic was the use of mold, which is basically penicillin. In Poland, they would mix wet bread with spiderwebs containing the mold spores to help treat wounds. There are dozens of little treatments like this, which have been exploited for the advancement of modern medicine. But this is a fantasy setting. That means magic, potions, and spells. Would magic be able to cure diseases? This is going to depend on the setting and how the magic works. It wouldn't be hard to imagine that a fantasy series would use mold to create potions to treat illnesses. But there are even mythical creatures which could cure diseases. Caladrius was a bird from Roman and European mythology which could cure diseases. These birds could be invaluable in prevention of plagues. How would magic work on plagues? Would you even have physicians? Well, that last one is a question, and the answer would depend on how magic treats illnesses. If each illness needs to be treated by its own spell, and you can't just use a general cure-all spell, under those conditions, a physician would still occur, but they would be a sort of cleric or mage, specializing in diseases and how to treat them. Maybe called a pathomancer? An alchemist could also be a physician, looking to balance the humorous, as it was described in the old times. If a general healing spell would address the diseases, then you wouldn't have physicians at all. But then, how widespread would healing magic be? Honestly, I would have to place healing magic as one of the 5 most powerful spells available for a fantasy setting, if not the most important. Healing magic would be common that could potentially create a strong dead stop for all plagues. There is another spell which would have an influence on plagues. That would be communication spells. A spell which lets you send messages instantaneously over long distances. This is probably another of the top spells available. One of the problems with spreading of plagues is people who travel to one town but don't know that they have the plague. With a communication spell, they could relay information to far-flung towns without the risk of spreading the plague. If a cure is discovered, it could be sent out quickly and no risk of spreading the infection. This alone would have reduced the death toll of the Black Plague by half at bare minimum. But would the plagues be the same as in our world? This is a magical world with magical creatures. Could that mean a magical plague? Yes, but what sorts? Viruses seek to multiply. They are not out there to kill. They want to maximize their infection paths. Killing the host isn't always the best means. I've seen many different magical diseases in fantasy series. One that turns flesh to stone or metal. This is an issue. If the body is left immobile and unable to move, it will limit the spread of infection. Thus, it doesn't make sense as a virus. At least not a natural one. An artificial one, created for war, would make sense. Another very common one is undead plagues. This, however, does make excellent sense. It is like countless parasitic infections found in insects. It would alter their behavior to encourage spreading the virus. The chance of transmission increases with proximity, particular touch, but even better if you can get blood exposure. Now most zombie hordes seek flesh. They will bite and claw people, who will fight back to protect themselves. That means injuries to both the zombie and their victim. Absolutely perfect. On the sillier side, we have the weird assortment of diseases, which rather than kill, cause other problems, such as changes in appearances or gaining weird abilities. The first is relatively benign, if not potentially inconvenient. The second, however, would be advantageous, and people may seek it out. Now, in the real world, we have bacteria which are resistant to medicine after multiple exposures. There is a risk that a magically resistant disease could develop eventually. That could be disastrous in a fancy setting. But there is an issue with plagues. There is no limit to how often disease has been used in warfare. It will be used here. If the disease only targets humans, orcs could knowingly infect a human settlement to weaken them and then rush in. They would have no problem catching the plague, at least until it makes the jump. That is, unless they can prevent it from changing. This pathomancer is starting to make sense. Could that be their name for a physician? But why fight, with some species being immune to the plague? This would be an excellent way to engage in warfare, create a deadly enough virus, infect a couple of prisoners, and let them escape back to their own nation. Then let the plague start to spread out. Then once everyone has died, then you move in. No battles, no glory, but hey, an easy victory. Yeah, magic and diseases change a lot of things, doesn't it? What do you think? Did I miss anything or disagree anywhere? Let me know. The physician worked in silence, mixing herbs and working his knowledge in magic, all while Adam and his mother watched. The physician approached the young boy, the bowl filled with his tincture. Adam recoiled at the bitter taste and made a face. The physician nodded to his patient as he left. More of his medicine awaited Adam in the future. Overall, the presence of magic could have profound impacts on how plagues and diseases are handled in a fantasy setting, from who was sent to treat the ill, what methods may be employed in treatment, which ones would occur, and how it would be exploited in war or change. Thank you for watching, adventurers. I was hoping to also cover magical surgeries too today, but let's save that for next time. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.